Thank you very much. I'm Simon Quinn. I'm the Executive Director of the High Streets Task Force, and welcome to our fourth in this webinar series, where we're really looking at how we make the journey from recovery to transformation. But it's been an interesting week for High Streets. You will have seen that more stores are closing, more jobs are being lost. And footfall, though we thought there might be more of an uplift once the hospitality industry opened, is still around the 50 to 55% level of what it was in 2019. Holiday towns are doing a little bit better. They are only down about 40%, but our larger cities are down over 50%, somewhere close to 60% in certain instances. So we're still going through this recovery period. And whilst we're looking to the long term, we think it's also important that we actually think about the here and now. Oops, sorry, I'm going the wrong way. There we go. We think about the place assurance, creating safe, clean environments that people will have confidence to visit. And that may be a focus for what we're doing for quite some time. That's really part of the communication that we need to be doing now and the image building. And so that's really what we're going to be looking at. You've got a sneaky glimpse of our route map a short moment ago. This is the overall framework. You don't need to really understand this at this stage. We've already had the sessions that have looked at leadership, looked at developing visions. And though both of those were forward-looking, we still had this place management process that we hope is in place in most of your towns, looking at the here and now and starting to work to that. But today what we're moving on to is to think about rebranding. This idea is one of the 4 regeneration strategies that the research and the data tells us makes a difference to places. So we're going to look at 2 aspects of this. Placefulness, which Steve will be explaining to us later, this identity concept about a place, so that we're not just doing the same thing everywhere and potentially ending up with clone towns again. But this need for dialogue, this need for listening, and this need to understand places. And we think that's not only part of the development of the transformation, but it's also essential now. So in order to look at that, we've got a panel that brings in knowledge of things happening at this time, but some developments in new technology, which allowed us not only to experience places actually, but virtually. So we'll be hearing first from Polly Barnfield from Maybe, who will give us an insight into how that is done. Nicola, who's putting this into practice in Putney. Then Steve, who will talk about placefulness itself. And then I'm delighted we have Lydia as well, who will look at how they're communicating with people in smaller towns and engaging them as they go forward in this process. So let's start with Polly and Nicola, and I'll hand back to Polly first.
Thank you, Simon, for that great introduction, and it's delighted to be with you all here today. As Simon says, I'm going to talk to you about how you can help understand and curate your place image through social media, or as I like to call it, deliver localism through conversation. And then Nicola's going to give us a really good view of how it's working within Putney. Let me see if my controls work. Brilliant. Oh, Tom, I've gone too far. Will you go back for me one? Sorry. Thank you. So how we do this first, maybe as a platform that collects data, because fundamentally every place is increasingly the sum of its digital parts. So we collect the data from working with Google, work at collecting the data from every place in the UK. And we currently are listening to just over or just under 2 million businesses. This has been accelerated dramatically during lockdown. So we identify all the businesses and the organisations within a place. And then every night, our technology goes back and collects what they've said on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. That means we collect about 40 million posts every month, and that's increasing all of the time. And then we put all of that data through a clever machine that starts to surface some insights. And so you can start to understand what a place is saying. So you say, well, why do we do that? Why does that matter? Well, as I said, increasingly places are the sum of their digital parts. They are a combination of their offer and their community, as in the demand. And that's often a mixture of reality and perceptions. But once you can see the data, you start to bring it into focus, and you can start to blend the perception and the reality very easily. And that's why we're collecting the data, and why it's going to be published on the High Street Task Force dashboard so that every place can see their businesses and the conversation with people through this lens. You could say why? Well, the why is very simple. 15 years ago, social media didn't exist. It wasn't a thing. But now half the planet talk to each other for about 3 hours a day through social media. Now, we knew before COVID that there was a gap between how consumers were using their mobile phones and social media and how businesses were using it. And by businesses, I mean by default businesses within a place. What we saw before COVID was that up to 43% of high street businesses, only 43% of businesses were active on social media on a daily basis. But really worryingly, during COVID, and more to the point now, it still only sits at about 5%. With national businesses, and we know that national businesses very rarely talked about place, that's a slightly different conversation, 68% of businesses were active on social media pre-COVID. Right now it's dropped to 26%. Now, we knew that communication and perceptions on social media were important before COVID, but now more than ever, with people reliant upon digital to keep in touch with place, these aspects have become more and more important. So here you can see the trend that we've been measuring through lockdown, and this is a selection of 10 towns. We've got boundaries of 3,300 UK boundaries that we measure on a daily basis. You can see from this how, and I'm not picking on anybody here, this is taken at random. The Cirencester is the red line here. You can see that pre-COVID, 25% of businesses in Cirencester were active on social media. You can see how this has dropped now, and this data was correct until the beginning of this week, and you can see how this hasn't risen. As a combination, obviously, of teams being furloughed, but I think it's sometimes a matter of priority. And fundamentally, we've got this gap where consumers are using digital much more, but places and businesses, potentially because teams are furloughed, are using it much less. So what Maybe does is takes all that data and provides a set of tools that means that you can manage social media about your place. You can listen and you can learn and understand what people think. But most importantly, you can collaborate with the businesses and communities on campaigns and programs, because the more you can do to welcome people back to your town centre right now and celebrate the things about what makes your place special, the more it matters. So what this data shows is what's working. It shows you how people feel. It shows you how people are influencing the conversation in your place. It shows you exactly what people are talking about at an individual business level. And on the right-hand side, you've got a concept of place insights where you can understand the percentage of businesses that are active on social media, what your place as a whole says and what it means. And the combination of being able to see the data and measure the impact that it has on physical results suddenly makes social media part of your place and enables you to see and have an impact on physical outcome. If you want a sort of proof point, one of the businesses that we tracked through lockdown was Primark. And what was fascinating about Primark, they went from a business that had £600 million in revenue on a monthly basis to one that had zero, because they don't do e-commerce. What was fascinating about their social media, and this is looking at their sentiment graph, is that they were one of the few businesses that didn't stop talking to their customer. Their level of communication was extraordinary, and the content they produced was really relevant to their audience. They taught them how to celebrate a birthday alone. They taught them how to do a Zoom call. They spoke to them as individuals at a very personal level, and they responded to every single comment they posted on social media. When they opened up, they had queues where many people didn't. And I think that is a really big learning, which is the more connected you stay with your audience, the more likely they are to return. Within the Maybe platform, we provide every place, every organisation with not just the insights, but also the tools to engage. So by pulling in the data from Twitter, Facebook and Instagram, it means any organisation, regardless of skills, ability, have the data to be able to talk to all the businesses within their place. So within any place dashboard, you have all of the conversations from Twitter, Facebook and Instagram for all of the businesses within your place. And Nicola will talk about this more in her session, but it makes it possible for you to really engage the audience that represent your place, because it's their combined conversations that creates the draw to bring people to your place. So some of the things that this enables you to do, because you've got access to the data, is to really celebrate the success and create a community of champions for your place. There's been a lovely example of how they're using this in Exeter, which is on a weekly basis, they're celebrating the most engaged posts within the place. This showcases each place in a very different way. It lets you understand the conversation that the place is generating, because that's why, as a consumer, I'm coming to it. So by having the tools at your fingertips to be able to understand what is the conversation your businesses are portraying, that fundamentally is the sum of your place. That's why people are coming. And that's what we aim to help all of places in the UK be able to do, which is to amplify the businesses in their place, because that's what the place is about. So localism through conversation is about being able to understand and curate your place image through social media. Sounds very simple, and that's exactly what the dashboard and training that the High Street Task Force are offering to you, so that you can listen and respond, engage with your place and celebrate your champions, because that is why, as an individual, I'm going to turn up. Remember, everybody's life is run by their mobile phone, and that you have to portray your place in a way that I understand and want to turn up through. So very much look forward to making this data available to you and the training that IPM are going to provide alongside it.
Thanks, Polly. We'll go to Nicola now.
You're on mute, Nicola.
Sorry about that. I'm flattered to be asked to talk today. I have worked in place management since 2003 as a town centre manager within Wandsworth Council, and then for Positively Putney Bid since 2017. I was born in Wandsworth, and although I do not live in the borough anymore, I'm very passionate about the area. Like all place managers, since lockdown, we've been helping businesses in every way we can and looking how we can adapt and deliver our services that will be most beneficial. Putney is most famous for the Oxford and Cambridge boat race, held in early spring every year, which sadly was cancelled this year. This itself was a massive blow for our hospitality businesses, who rely on that day to make a significant amount of income. For those who don't know, Putney is in southwest London, within the borough of Wandsworth. It's located on the River Thames, with Putney Bridge going from Putney into London via Fulham. Putney Bridge was the second bridge to be built over the Thames in 1729. Although Putney is just 6 miles from central London, it feels miles away. Putney has lots of green space, lots of beautiful houses, and has a strong community spirit. Putney is popular for exercising outdoors, especially for rowers, runners and cyclists. Although this quote is taken from 1903, I couldn't say it better if I tried. And thus we take leave of Putney, one of the pleasantest of the London suburbs, as well as the most accessible. The immense increase in the number of houses in late years testifies to its popularity. But there is still an almost unlimited extent of open ground which cannot be covered, and with wood and water, common and hill, there will always be an element of freshness and openness in Putney, seldom to be attained so near London. Putney has a rich historical past. Robert the Ferryman of Putney was mentioned in the household accounts of Edward I in 1272. Putney was the birthplace of Thomas Cromwell, made Earl of Essex by Henry VIII. The Putney debates took place at St Mary's Church, which is at the bottom of Putney High Street, in October 1647, and it profoundly influenced British politics today. No wonder we stick with the political ideas. William Pitt, the Prime Minister, was born in Putney. Clement Attlee, Prime Minister 1945, was born in Putney. Nick Clegg, Deputy Prime Minister 2010 to 2015, lived here until he recently moved to America. Unsurprisingly, we've had various world champion and Olympic rowers trained and nurtured in Putney. And with 4 world records, 2 Olympic gold medals, 3 Commonwealth titles, Daley Thompson is considered to be one of the greatest decathletes of all time, and he owns and runs a gym in Putney. We have a long list of actors and musicians, including Pierce Brosnan, Grace Jones, Simon Le Bon. Ronan Keating owns a cafe in Putney. Frequently talking about Putney in their publicity is comedian Jack Whitehall. who lived in Putney growing up, and his mother and father still live here. Michael and Hilary Whitehall turned on our Christmas lights last year, and during lockdown they have frequently tweeted about people not adhering to social distancing in Putney, as the embankment looks like the French Riviera. Lastly, the cartoon character Mr. Ben, created by David McKee in the 70s and aired on BBC One up until the year 2000. David lived in Putney and based Mr. Ben's adventures in Putney. This image gives a great artistic impression of the Putney community. Oh, missing a slide. Never mind. Putney has amazing accessibility. It's served by mainline railway trains to London Waterloo from Putney train station and by London Underground District Line from East Putney and Putney Bridge stations. It has 16 bus routes and 7 night buses. Putney Pier is served by the River Bus to and from Blackfriars Millennium Pier. Putney Bridge leads into Putney High Street, then with Upper Richmond Road across the top, which is the TfL Red Route network. In the London plan, Putney is identified as one of 35 major centres. This classification means it has a borough-wide catchment, contains over 50,000 square metres of retail, leisure and service floor space, and a relatively high proportion of comparison goods relative to convenience goods. According to the 2011 census, Putney has a population of 77,000 people, with 46% of residents classified as higher managerial and professional socio-economic status. The average 3-bedroom house is £700,000. Sorry, Tom, I think there's 2 slides missing, but don't worry, if you just go back to that one that I was just on, not that one, the one before. Yeah, that one. With all this going on, you'd expect it to be a vibrant town centre. It was a great retail high street of the 80s and the 90s, has had no local competition. It had a great range of 8 independent boutiques in small units on Putney High Street, and daytime trade was boosted by the large office blocks along Upper Richmond Road. It became a victim of its own success, and the national chains all wanted to come and priced out the independents. It became a clone town of the early 2000s, and the loyal local residents started shopping elsewhere, be that central London whilst they were commuting into town, online, or in the improved local town centres. Meanwhile, permitted development rights changed the office blocks to residential, losing vital daytime trade. Car ownership increased. Putney High Street is the most direct route into London from the A3. It's a narrow road with high buildings and lots of traffic, which results in poor air quality. We have a number of absent landlords with substantial planning applications in the pipeline, but they're sitting on properties with increasing vacancy and areas that look very run down. It's not all gloom and doom, but we do have our challenges. As retail demand has reduced, we have a thriving nighttime economy pre-COVID, with all the busy workers returning late at night wanting to eat and drink, and at weekend, large rowing events and regular Fulham football crowds. Putney is in the final round of the Futures High Street Fund with a vision of how do we make Putney great again. To celebrate the rowing season towards the end of February, we had a professional artist paint onto empty and operational shop windows with the theme of rowing and the River Thames, which, although they were not appreciated by the rowing crowds as the races were cancelled, they have been appreciated by our local residents on their daily exercise during lockdown and are still brightening up the town centre. We had already ordered 14,000 reusable cups to launch on Boat Race Day in our pubs and bars. Instead of keeping them in storage until Boat Race 2021, we've been giving them out to pubs and restaurants, then to use in their outside dining areas now that they have reopened. This saves businesses money in buying single-use plastics whilst also helping the environment. We've always known Putney has narrow footpaths and have been working with Wandsworth Council over the last 3 years on a comprehensive programme of widening them. This work was midway through as lockdown hit. We used the opportunity to put in temporary widening. And sticking with our rowing theme, we had playful social distancing stickers and queue management floor graphics made. Within 2 weeks of lockdown, we joined Shop Happy to help businesses without an online presence continue to trade. Finally, our parklets. We actually ordered these pre-lockdown as part of our aim to make the town centre more green and welcoming. We did not have any prior knowledge of how advantageous these would be if a pandemic hit. We posted this photo on Tuesday this week, and it's been our most popular social media post ever. In the middle of April, I was on a Bid Foundation Zoom call, and Polly explained how the Maybe platform could make managing social media easier and ensure you are listening to the conversations that matter about your town centre. We're a small team, and due to lack of time, although we regularly posted on our social media channels, I wasn't sure we necessarily listened and engaged as much as we could or should. So that evening I thought I'd have a look. I opened a Maybe account and started uploading our bid businesses and Putney influencers onto the platform. And very quickly in one place, I could see what they were all saying. I am no technical wizard, but it is so easy to use and navigate. My colleague Anna joined the training calls that Maybe were offering, and we went from there. We knew that people were using social media more than ever before, and that as the bid, we were privy to lots of information that people wanted to know, such as which businesses are open, which takeaways are serving on which days. As the weeks progressed, we've been thinking about the change in people's lifestyles and the new way of working as an opportunity for Putney. We've always known we had lots of local residents who commuted into town and didn't have time to use the local facilities. Thinking about the increasing desire to support local businesses, we want to make sure that people do continue to support them when life returns to some sort of normality. These people working from home for the foreseeable future and possibly forever, how do we attract them into Putney? One of the ways was via social media, using local businesses and residents to help us tell the story of all the great aspects of Putney under the hashtag #ShareOurPutney. We launched the campaign a month ago and there have been 350 posts using the hashtag, with engagement of over 3,000. Our own social media followers have gone up by nearly 20%. However, it has in fact also assisted us in achieving one of our principal aims in our business plan of helping businesses work better together. When we've discussed this in the past, we had focused on physical networking and encouraging giving each other business when possible, and deemed it more relevant for our office sector. However, through the Share Our Putney campaign, we've introduced to each other a community of independent businesses with the same aims. We have business owners who have told us they have owned business in Putney for 20 years and never felt so much a part of it. These businesses are now recommending each other to their customers, both physically and virtually. I strongly believe that we've helped them through this pandemic, both emotionally and financially, and made them stronger for the future. By sharing each other's content, they're reaching so many more people, all predominantly local, which can only benefit them in the long run. Next steps for us is a survey. What do these new people want in their town centre? How can we get them to come in on a daily basis? Is it workspace? Is it specialist shops? Is it more coffee shops? And very soon we'll be launching the survey on our social media platforms. We've always run an employee loyalty scheme for people who work in Putney to get daytime deals and special offers to encourage daytime spend. We're now looking to expand this to residents working from home. Maybe a loyalty scheme where they collect points to spend back into Putney. Social media has also extended conversations for us with other sectors. A young local artist saw the hashtag #ShareOurPutney and interacted with us, which started a conversation which has resulted in him now working on an amazing welcome piece of artwork on an ugly building wall just as you enter Putney, which ticks off another of our aims from our business plan. So, my recommendation is to take the opportunity and join the High Street Task Force Maybe platform. It really will make your social media conversations so much more meaningful whilst reducing your workload.
Thank you, Nicola. We'll move on to Steve to have a look at what placefulness means. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm coming through loud and clear. Cool. Okay, why is it some places they make us feel like we belong, they engender a sense of well-being, and other places they just make us feel uncomfortable, fearful, or quite often just bored. These are important questions because when planners, architects and others involved in placemaking get it wrong, it can seriously undermine people's well-being. And let's be honest, over the course of the 20th century, we did get it wrong quite often. These are the Hume Crescents in Manchester, the product of a top-down rational planning approach designed to make people's lives better, but actually made them worse and flattened their existing neighbourhoods in the process, blighted their lives for 20 years and then were demolished within 25. So placefulness has its roots in this period, a response to mass redevelopment projects, uniform, top-down, one-size-fits-all solutions, with Twan's concept of topophilia, topophobia, literally the love of place. And it calls for more people-centered development to reflect the complexity of how places change. The development of placefulness, however, is also a reaction to globalization and the standardization and rationalization of places, summarized in Ted Relf's notion of placelessness, which highlights concern within communities who are anxious about losing control over the decisions which affect their place and how it develops, with people growing fearful of losing their place identity. And it also rests on the idea of Auger and his idea of non-places, places which have no meaning to people, are unlikely to generate strong emotional connections. And we have them in all our towns and cities, bland, over-sanitized, standardized corporate hotels, departure lounges, shopping centres, chain stores, we find them everywhere. And these anxieties continue today in identikit, sprawling suburban housing estates, which lack any clear identity or even a centre. And as we've seen recently in the criticism of the new garden cities, places where people have no choice but to drive to out of town retail to access their everyday needs. And within town and city centres, we see it through the serial reproduction of the same chains and brands, a concern reflected in the RTPI's Clone Towns report and the erosion of local distinction. Now, you might argue brands like Costa are popular and they bring much needed service to places, but as we were seeing with the demise of many national multiple retailers before COVID, and now restaurant change, consumer behaviour suggests many are tiring of this uniformity and want something different. And another challenge comes perhaps from local governance and concerns that places have become subject to excessive regulation, licensing and control, with strict controls on social gathering, performance, street trade, cafes, and multiple hurdles faced by event organisers, which are said to sanitise places, or as Anna Minton suggests in her book Ground Control, socially cleanse them. We have opportunities to make places into something more pleasurable and inclusive, but seemingly we restrained by planning regulations, rules and bylaws. As Jane Jacobs kind of suggested, a street safe enough for children to play on is safe for everyone, but in this example, we're trying to ban children. This is my idolised utopian high street. This is what it means. This is what the perfect high street is for me. Full of meaning, it's unique and different. It has its own history and heritage. It's aesthetically pleasing. It's welcoming. It has space for creativity and art. It's authentic to me. It's more than just shopping. And ultimately, it should be a place that makes me feel proud and that I belong to a place. However, the reality for many people, and I apologise if you know this high street, I'm not picking anyone, this is a reality, a very functional place. It's thoroughly uninspiring. Who on earth would want to linger here? And it's no wonder people aren't flocking back to the high street if this is what they're faced with. Then you see these visions for the high street, and how often do they depict, frankly, what I think is a quite frightening vision of the future, a generic landscape populated by faceless citizens. So, lacking, therefore, is a sense of place, the subjective feelings evoked by a place from both an insider perspective, people who live there, and for the people who visit that place. So how do we engender that? So what are the ways forward? How do we bring placefulness to high streets? Well, a good starting point is informality. And if you go to Lagos, you'll find it in abundance. Here we find a vibrant street scene full of activity. There is no guidance. There is no frameworks. The citizens have just done it for themselves. Okay, there is issues with informality, but can we take a little bit of inspiration from this? And what's wrong with a bit of scuzziness? This is Richard Sennett's argument, a sociologist who writes about urban life. Graffiti and murals in Manchester's northern quarter gives it a place distinction. It's full of independence, bars and eateries, and it's different from the retail core with its and the Arndale Centre with its mainstream brands, which could be anywhere. So why does all new design, therefore, have to be the same? What opportunities are there to make places more interesting and different, to transform them into something more pleasurable, sensuous, and welcoming? And why not sometimes just a little bit more fun? And as we might learn, and I've kind of done this research in Blackpool on placemaking, and I think Blackpool is exemplary. The new promenade is fantastic. And often people talk about preserving heritage to give distinction, but what about new interventions? Why can't we do something a bit quirky and different in Blackpool? And the photograph on the right is one I took in Athens last year. As some of you will know, we've put together as a task force guidance on tactical urbanism. But let's get serious here. This is more than just temporary street closures. This is a long-term process which involves communities in placemaking. And we might learn from this approach, allowing the freedom and flexibility for communities to make small-scale incremental changes on their high street could be the pathway to more fundamental transformation. And we could take inspiration from W.H. White's Small Life of Urban Spaces. He talks about the huge reservoir of space yet untapped by imagination. And where better to start than with the high street, where we can find empty the shops, vacant lots, overtly wide streets, awkward underpasses, vast empty car parks, and a multitude of leftover forgotten microspaces. If only we could let the community have a go. And research I did at MMU some time ago is around local creativity and its importance of what it brings to places, and harnessing that in creating greater place distinction. And what we showed through this research and others is how embracing local creativity adds to community identity and generates social cohesion. So, but there are challenges here. Community voices within high street initiatives remain poorly represented, and there remains constraints to community capacity to act at the neighbourhood scale. As Patsy Healy reminds us, everywhere's different. We need unique constructions in specific situations. There's no one-size-fits-all here model. We need place-specific solutions and networks. And as Visconti and his team argue, it's only when the community and the stakeholders share the same understanding of the street, which gives place back to its owners, can the consumption of a commons that is equally meaningful and inactive be fully appreciated. So placefulness, therefore, is something that can develop from within communities, but we need place-specific networks, and we need the channels and processes to make it happen, to make inclusive place-based collaboration. But there's lots of questions here. And there's a mismatch here. The private sector has failed us in many places. Why have we got empty shops? We know problems with the private property landlords, and we've heard about absentee landlords already. Let's move them aside. If the private sector can't serve the interests of place, then who will? And then local government. How can public strategy better accommodate tactical, flexible community initiative? But then again, not all communities are the same. How can parochial communities be encouraged to develop a more outward-looking and inclusive attitude, to consider their place as a destination, not just for themselves? But what forms of governance do we need to make this happen? And where community capacity is lacking, what can local government do to foster collaboration? These are all big questions. Ways forward, and I think there are examples of practice out there, opportunities for community-led action to occupy spaces where market and government have failed through localised micro-scale interventions. If you look on the IPM blog, you can see we talk about the Wivington Village Partnership, which we celebrate as an example of this kind of more grassroots community-led approach, leading on small environmental improvements and place activation. Adding that capacity where local government can't do it, where the private sector just seems incapable. But there's also scope for local government to be more creative, what some are calling the new municipalism. And I'd say go to Blackpool, read our paper on cultural strategy and cultural policy around Blackpool. There's lots to be learned. But here's a more prosaic example. Used to be my old local station, located in Earlham, halfway between Manchester and Warrington. It's the 10th busiest suburban station in Greater Manchester, but despite that, the building was derelict for over a decade and fell into a state of disrepair. In fact, the landowner kept chickens in it whilst we were all huddled on the platform in the cold with one bus shelter for 100 people. There was no toilet facilities, no information. In fact, Radio 5 once broadcast live from there because it was voted the 10th most dangerous station to visit after dark in the country. This is Earlham Station today. It's a combination of the Friends of Earlham Station group was set up within the community. There's a local charity, the Hamilton Davis Trust. They worked in collaboration with Salford Council. They bought the property. And now the new station building is open. It has a cafe bar, it has meeting rooms, a small museum, it has a privately rented flat so they can get income. There's additional car parking, secure cycle storage, public realm improvements, and it hosts small events. It has free Wi-Fi and public toilets. It's a modest destination, and people do go and visit it. But it was costly. It cost £2 million, a lot of effort to make happen. But it shows the value of the public, the private, and the community sector coming together. So my final words: placefulness involves these things. Understanding place is a process. It's never ending. It's unbounded, and it's about experience and meaning. Often that's lost in strategy. You need to accept there's no single vision of the high street that can be ubiquitously applied. There's no one-size-fits-all solution. Rather, your vision should be multiple, dynamic, and constantly adapting. And the final message there is to design your future high streets as a place to be experienced and customised by those who regularly inhabit the space. But they need channels and access to make that happen. So I'll leave you with an inspirational quote from Peter Kageyama. Co-creators can fill this gap between official action with their efforts and their presence, and that can be the difference between a city that is loved and a city that is merely lived in. And that's all I'm going to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Let's move on to Lydia, who's going to tell us something about the local authority working with communities in East Lindsey. Lydia.
Thank you, Simon. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, you're fine.
Thank you. And I should have control. Excellent. So I moved actually to Lincolnshire about 20 years ago, and I resonate with a lot of things that Steve just said. I fell in love with the county, and I've been very lucky actually to work in various roles across Lincolnshire that have either played a part in improving or promoting the place. My current role at East Lindsey, I moved at the beginning of this year. January I started, so not long before lockdown hit actually. So just as a way of an introduction, East Lindsey is the largest district within Lincolnshire. It's actually the second largest district council area in the whole of the UK. It splits into two distinct areas. The Lincolnshire coast, so 50 miles of beautiful coastline, and the Lincolnshire Wolds, which is designated an area of outstanding natural beauty and has a range of small, quaint market towns. And that's what I'm focusing my discussion on today, which is the work that we've done with the Institute of Place Management to really develop our market towns across the Lincolnshire Wolds. So the work that we did with the Institute of Place Management kick-started a programme called Vital and Viable. I'm just going to give you a very quick tour of some of our market towns. So we're starting with Louth, and this is really home to a number of great independent shops and is known locally throughout Lincolnshire really as the capital of the Lincolnshire Wolds, and has a really great selection of local food and drink outlets as well. Horncastle is very much known for its antiques and has got some really great historical links to the explorer Joseph Banks. We've got Spilsby, birthplace to Sir John Franklin, and in the top right hand corner of your screen is a beautiful building called Sessions House, and we're hopeful that through a programme of funding that may be reimagined into a new theatre space. And Alford, the picture in the top left actually is the oldest thatched building in the whole of the UK. We have an annual craft fair and a 5-sailed windmill, as you can see. So we had a big task. We weren't just focused on one place, one town. We had a selection of different market towns. So really engagement was key at the start of this process. And the Institute of Place Management really kicked that off with a series of vital and viable workshops. And when I came into the team in early 2020, I really wanted to follow up on that great introduction that we had. So we continued that series of workshops, face-to-face meetings with businesses, different associations across the town, different community groups. And you can see they were really well attended by, relatively small towns. And what we wanted to do was really pull out what they wanted to see and what they felt was needed for their local towns. So engagement was really pivotal. Oh, sorry, I've flicked. I don't know. Are you able to take me back to?
Tom probably can, yeah.
All right, thank you. Sorry. So alongside the public engagement sessions and the face-to-face meetings, communication was really important as well. They felt really disconnected from the local authority and from their councillors. So we set about having a series of e-newsletters, and we are still developing kind of our social media channels as well, but this was really just the beginning of this programme of work. Because we're working across so many different market towns, what I wanted to do was trial and pilot, I suppose, some ideas. So we picked Louth as one of those towns that had really had a great deal of engagement from our local businesses, our local communities, and also a range of volunteers that had really helped shape the development of what was the key hook, or what was the main reason that people enjoyed, loved their town, and why people visited. And Louth really stood out as being that key connector to our local food and drink within Lincolnshire. So the article on the left was actually published in a local Lincolnshire magazine. I think it was March or April time, so just as we went into lockdown. Also, the pilot project in Louth looked at how we engage more with our local communities through mapping your town, what was really important from the local community and from the local people that lived there. We did all that virtually because by this time we were in April, and that has led to the start of a action report based on Louth that we want to roll out across our market towns. And I think what's really struck me through this process is really how we've managed to engage really deeply with those people that represent those market towns across Lincolnshire. But it is also important to ensure that we have that holistic strategic approach to economic development, not just across East Lindsey, but within our market towns. And I'm really pleased that through our work of the Vital and Viable programme, that we've adopted that as part of our corporate strategy. So as well as having that corporate strategy, it was really important to have some quick wins for the market towns and for the people to see some real changes that were happening. I think there were two key areas, one of which was around the place improvements, whether that's the cleanliness or the public realm, and also the promotion as towns that really wanted to attract visitors to the area. And what we've been able to do is utilise the High Street Recovery Fund that was announced by government to take forward some of those action points that the community and businesses have said that was really important. And finally, it's not just about place and promotion. To me, it's the people that are really at the heart of this. They're not just shaping how the future of these market towns look, but they're also, if they're proud of their places, they will do an excellent job for us in promoting the place as well. And to me, it's the people that really make Lincolnshire distinctive. Thank you.
Lydia, thank you very much for that. I'm pleased we had the chance to have you. We've had some comments from previous webinars about what this means in smaller towns. And whilst we've said that in many instances there is great activity going on in smaller towns, I think it's really difficult sometimes for local authorities, when they have many locations, to give attention to all of those. And what I've always liked about your process has been this involvement by talking to people and hearing and involving them, so that they become enthusiasts for their place.
Absolutely.
We normally have several questions on here, but my team has been doing too good a job in answering these, so most of them seem to have disappeared. There is a question for Nicola, which is about the Putney parklets. Were they entirely funded by the bid or shared with the local authority?
So the parklets were part of this Putney High Street improvements project that the council have been working on with various stakeholders over the last few years. And they were bidding for some funding from TfL, and they needed match funding. So the bid had said we'd give £20,000 to the project. That was actually in 2017, and the project's been delayed for a whole number of reasons. And then at the end of last year, it became apparent that some of the aspects of the project that we maybe felt were most important, which was the greening side, had been passed aside to have some of the other aspects, like the very expensive paving. So at that point, we looked to see how we could sort of amend the plans. And so actually the bid has bought the parklets outright, the two that have been installed. But the council liked them so much before they were installed, they have actually agreed to put in another two in Putney and other places, but those ones haven't gone in yet.
Okay, thanks for that. There's a question which I think has been answered, but Steve, not to everyone. So it was about, how do you persuade local government to be more creative and allow the community to be involved in placemaking?
Well, my flippant response was set up a high street task force. I mean, some local authorities do it really well, and we've seen some examples from these webinars. And the one I'm most familiar with is the We Are Withington and the Withington Village Partnership, which we've written about on the IPM blog. And it's difficult because, you know, I think local authorities, they lack capacity at the moment, but they need people on the ground. They need that kind of neighbourhood insight and knowledge. And I think something, you know, and we've been working with Manchester City Council for a while now to kind of shift an attitude, really, and actually, you know, to change the attitude of the leadership to think, well, actually, you know, we don't have the capacity to do everything we need to do in our high streets. What can we do to foster great local collaboration? Now, the challenge is some communities have got lots of activity and capacity, others don't, and I think that's really the real role for local government is where there are active place partnerships, how do they nurture and support them, and where there aren't any partnerships, how do they build that capacity? But that's a classic community development problem we've been asking ourselves for 40, 50 years. Okay,
thanks for that. A question for Lydia. You mentioned you used ERDF funding to help with your quick wins. Could you say a bit more about how that was done?
So we've used the Recovery High Street funding, which was announced by government fairly recently and has been given to district councils. And we looked at that very carefully, and really picking up on Steve's point, actually, we thought, how can we use this as a catalyst to work in partnership with those local groups? So we have worked with the local town councils on an individual basis, but also bringing in, from the work that we did initially with the Vital and Viable workshops, to bring in those business associations or local community groups. And we're now working with them. And I think this is a really key point, is that getting our team as a district council out and about into these places and working with those communities or business groups or the town councils to help them put an action plan basically together that allows us to draw down that funding effectively and to get it used within those towns to see some real benefits quickly.
Thank you for that. We've probably got time for a couple more. One which asks about whether the individuality push, the distinctiveness, diversity, also plays a key role in making town centres more resilient for the future, and Polly may have insight into that. Polly, you're on mute.
Sorry, Simon. The future of yeah, I mean, every place is very much the sum of what it's saying, and I think a lot of what Steve was saying is really fascinating, from the sense of, if you can see what people in a place are talking about, it makes it much easier to make those decisions. So I think, you know, social media is often misunderstood, but actually fundamentally think of it as a 24/7 exit survey. So whatever you're thinking of doing, if you can tap into it and listen and engage with the right people in it, it's much easier to make decisions happen faster, or validate decisions faster, test ideas faster. Don't think of it just as a marketing channel. Think of it as something that helps you make places better, quicker, because it's a barometer of people.
Thank you. And Nicola, just following up on that, I think you mentioned that Putney was a bit of a clone town. Do you think now that this diversity is making it a more resilient town?
I'd say it's a difficult time to say. We're a bit mixed. So actually, I would say that our independents are doing not much better, but much better than the nationals are post-COVID in Putney. So I assume that we will have some national closures further down the line. So yes, we are building resilience, but I think we're probably gonna go through an element of vacancies. And the problem, as I said in my talk, is that where the nationals have come in, they've really pushed the rent up, and therefore the independents struggle to be able to pay that rent. So unless our landlords sort of have a bit of a wake-up call, I fear we're going to end up with some vacancies of some very big units for hopefully only a short while, but maybe could be longer.
Right, thanks very much. And there's one more question I'll answer, which is really this comment that the council want to wait until everything to do with COVID is fixed before it starts any visioning or other regeneration work. I think we're still in this very uncertain time. We don't know what the implications of COVID are going to be on our high streets. We've seen this this week with the announcements of more stores closing. And certainly the evidence which we talked about in the first two sessions suggested that, you know, we are in a great period of uncertainty. But I don't think that should be stopping planning and thinking. And I think particularly what's important is gathering evidence now, gathering data, making sure you really understand your centre, and starting to build these networks and partnerships, even with your communities, as we just heard from East Lindsey. Because unless you're in that position, I think you'll be behind other places. We may not exactly know where we are starting from, but we'll have a better feel. But we should know where we want to go. And I think that's the thing that really can be done at this stage, in getting a feeling of a way forward. So there are some other questions. We will, as usual, answer these online and post them up on the website afterwards. But we've also, as usual, got a couple of things for you to do. So Tom, can we just move me on to the next slide? We think that you should be at this stage doing perhaps a place perception snapshot. So we will post on our website some suggestion of how you should do that, in terms of looking at your town centre, seeing how externally people are thinking about it, and then using that perhaps to fashion some of the responses you might want to make. So to help make responses then, the second slide, we're going to be working with Maybe, who are a consortium partner in the task force, to look at a place-based social media campaign. We're looking for perhaps 25 locations to join us in this. Over 3 weeks, we'll provide some training to you on how you use the equipment that maybe has. It will require some time commitment, perhaps 2-3 hours a week for 3 weeks. But out of this, we'll then see you launch a small campaign in your location and then be able to monitor how effective that was. Now, we hope that this process will work and we'll be able to roll this out as an addition to the work that the task force and the support that the task force is happening. Again, you'll be able to register for this on our website. If you go back to where this webinar information was, as you know, we put support up for it afterwards. But thank you again to our speakers who have been involved today. I think they've given a great insight into some of the things that are going on. And it is this focus that we need to be communicating and engaging now, as well as building those relationships that will take us further forward. And what we're going to do next week, and thank you to the many of you who have joined us, is we round up this series by really looking at the role of the town centre and the high street in the wider economic, environmental and societal transformation. So we have some people from central government, from the property world, and someone who has taken a very different view of what the future of our high street should be in order to provide a debate. But we want to also think about what you want to do at the end of this process, what your high street or town centre will do. When I say winding up this series, we will be offering one further week, a shorter webinar, which will look at all of the resources and tools that the task force has available and how you might use those to take your route forward. So thank you to everyone who's joined us today. I think we've made it with actually a minute to spare, but don't forget, if you need information and want to explore some of the resources that are being added to the task force website, do have a look under resources. We've brought quite a lot more information onto there in the last week, which covers some of the earlier webinars we've done in this series. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week, hopefully.